My name is Sandra Calloway. I'm 38. And the Tuesday my mother told me, "We just needed your car for a few days, sweetheart. Don't turn this into something it's not." Was the morning I discovered what it takes for a reserved woman to finally raise her voice. It was just past 7 in the morning. I was standing at the kitchen counter in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, holding a mug of coffee in one hand and my phone in the other, staring out at the driveway. The driveway sat completely empty. My Honda CR-V had been parked there at midnight. By the time the sun came up, it had vanished. I had already dialed the police when my mother's call interrupted me. 3 days later, a state trooper would reach me from Allentown. He would explain that my car had been towed and held. He would tell me my younger sister had been behind the wheel without a valid license. He would tell me my niece and nephew were riding unrestrained in the back seat. He would tell me the total fees had climbed to $1,800. And then, gently, he would tell me that was the simple part of what he needed to say. Before I walk you back to that morning, please take a second to hit like and subscribe, and drop a comment below telling me your city and what time it is there right now. I want to know who's up with me tonight. Now let me take you back to the Sunday before any of this unraveled. The last Sunday I ever said the word mom without stopping to think. Actually, let me start with the morning the car was already gone. It was a Tuesday in October. The kitchen carried the scent of fresh coffee and the faint rubber smell of a new pair of sneakers. Carter was sitting at the table eating cereal with the focused intensity that 7-year-olds reserve for anything crunchy. My laptop was open beside the toaster with a QuickBooks file pulled up. Numbers first thing in the morning. Feelings come later, usually after a second cup. I walked Carter through brushing his teeth the way I always did while I topped off my coffee. Then I glanced out the window above the sink the way I always did, just to take stock of the day. The driveway was bare. I'm a CPA. I operate on process before panic. I grabbed the yellow legal pad I keep on the counter for grocery lists and wrote, 7:14 a.m. Honda CR-V missing from driveway. Then I called 911. The dispatcher was patient. She walked me through the right questions. I was on hold waiting for a unit when my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Don't panic. We borrowed it Friday night. We'll explain everything." The second text came right after. "Sweetheart, please." I told the dispatcher I had new information and would follow up. Then I sat down at the table across from Carter. "Mom, where's the car?" he asked. "Grandma needed to borrow it for the weekend," I said. He absorbed that without pushing further. He nodded the way children do when they tuck something away to revisit later. I called an Uber and pulled up my insurance app on the ride to the office just to confirm. No stolen vehicle flag anywhere. I made a mental note to ask my mother how she had gotten my spare key. Then I made a real note in the Excel document I kept for what I privately called personal incidents, the spreadsheet I had started the year my marriage ended. The one I never told anyone about. The one where nothing got to disappear. Patrice, the paralegal who shared the break room with me, took one look at my expression when I walked in and asked if I'd gotten any sleep. I gave her the smile a woman gives when she knows she's paying interest on it. "Mostly," I said. "Mostly isn't yes, Sandra. It's the closest I can get to yes right now." She let it go. I told myself the weekend borrowing would sort itself out with an explanation. By Friday at 6:14 in the evening it would. But the explanation was not going to be the one I was hoping for. 2 days before the empty driveway, I had driven out to my parents' house in Quakertown for Sunday dinner. I brought Carter wearing his soccer jersey even though there had been no game that day, because he was proud of it and because my mother would fawn over him in anything with a number on it. I pulled in behind my father's truck. The yard smelled the way Pennsylvania yards smell in October. Leaves burning 2 streets over, someone's gas grill still going. The dining room had 6 chairs pulled around the table. I counted the way I always counted. My father at the head. My mother to his right. My sister Renee. Renee's son Dylan. Renee's daughter Paige. Carter. That was 6 and I had a seat. I'd had a seat at that table for 30 years. But that Sunday my usual chair had been replaced by the folding chair from the back porch, the brown metal one, and my mother said breezily, "Oh honey, just grab the porch one. You're tall enough anyway." I grabbed it. Renee was partway through a story about driving Dylan to practice. She told it the way she told most stories, shoulders pulled up, eyes already a little red at the edges. My mother glanced at my father. My father did not glance back. He buttered a roll. It's just so much pressure, Renee said. Some weeks I can barely keep my eyes on the road. Honey, my mother said. I'm just being honest. Honey, my mother said again. I cut Carter's chicken. The casserole was green beans with cream of mushroom soup, and those crispy onions on top. I took 2 helpings because it was the food I'd grown up with, and the food of your childhood is a seat that nobody can pull out from under you. Carter was quiet on the drive back. He fell asleep against the window just before our exit. I turned the radio down about a mile out. Mom, he said, in the blurred voice of a child halfway into sleep. Yeah, bud. Why did Aunt Renee keep crying when nothing was wrong? Adults cry sometimes, I said. It isn't always about what's happening right in front of them. Okay, he said. I would eventually learn what Renee had been crying about. I would also learn it had been rehearsed. But that night, driving home with my son's cheek pressed against the cold glass, the car still felt completely like mine. After dinner that Sunday, before the dishes had been cleared, Carter and I went out to the driveway and I showed him the dash cam. I'd had it put in the year before after a parking lot fender bender where the other driver told 3 different versions of events to 3 different people. The cam was a compact black device tucked behind my rearview mirror. It captured both the road ahead and the cabin interior. It also kept running on a low power draw for a full hour after the engine cut off, in case anything happened while I was parked. Carter thought it was the greatest invention he had ever personally encountered. It can hear us, he said. Even when the car is sleeping, it can hear us. He pressed his small palm flat against the casing to feel the warmth of the electronics inside. The porch light clicked on, soft gold, and my mother appeared in the doorway with a dish towel across her shoulder. Honey, stay for a minute, she said. I made too much tea. I left Carter tracing the cable with one finger and went inside. My mother poured Earl Grey from a pot that had been steeping too long. She pulled open the drawer beside the stove to look for sugar, and from where I stood, I could see straight into the back of the drawer. There was a Honda key inside it on a small brass ring. My spare. I set my mug down. Mom, that's my extra key. She looked at the drawer as though she'd just noticed it herself. Oh, that's been in there for years. You never asked for it back. Can I take it tonight? Sweetheart, my hands are full. She closed the drawer. She gave me the soft, worn-out smile she had been giving me since I was 12. Don't make a scene over a piece of metal. I drank the tea. I told myself I'd ask again the following Sunday. There would not be a following Sunday in that house. On the drive home, the dash cam recorded the empty highway and the back of Carter's sleeping head. It also recorded me asking myself, out loud and quietly, why she hadn't handed over the key. I didn't know it then, but the cam had already begun doing its most important work. 43 hours later, my driveway was empty and my mother's voice was in my ear. Sweetheart, don't turn this into a scene. We borrowed it Friday for Renee's weekend with the kids. Her Subaru's been having transmission problems. We didn't want to bother you asking. Where is it right now? She's driving it back tonight. I was sitting at my desk. The fluorescent tube above my cubicle had a flicker in it on the left side. I could hear something rehearsed underneath my mother's voice. A quality I'd been aware of my whole life without ever giving it a name. I'd like the spare key back by tomorrow, I said. We'll see, sweetheart. We hung up. I opened Excel. I logged it. Tuesday 9:47 a.m. Mom called. Confirmed unauthorized Friday borrowing. Would not commit to returning spare key. I closed the file and got back to work. The Henderson receivables weren't going to reconcile themselves. I balanced 4 months before lunch. By 6 that evening, the car had not come back. I texted my mother. She replied, tomorrow, sweetheart. Stop worrying. I asked Carter whether he wanted spaghetti or grilled cheese for dinner. He said both. I made both. After he was in bed, I sat down at the kitchen table with my laptop and opened the insurance app. My policy included a telematics feature I'd opted into for a discount. The app logged every trip, mileage, start time, end time, origin, destination. I hadn't checked it in months. I scrolled back to Saturday afternoon. 2:14 p.m. The car had been detected on a side street in Allentown. Allentown is 38 miles north of my house. It was 41 miles north of where my sister lived. I was an accountant. I understood exactly what it meant when the numbers stopped matching the story. The story was the element doing the lying. I closed the app. I made a cup of decaf that I never drank. I sat at the table for a full hour with both hands wrapped around the warm mug, thinking about the taut threat in my mother's voice, about the fact that she hadn't once asked whether I was upset. The trooper would call on Friday at 6:14. Between now and then I had 3 days to wait and an audit log that was already filling up. The phone rang at exactly 6:14 on a Friday evening. The microwave was beeping at the same instant, 3 short tones telling me the pasta water had finished. For just a second I thought about letting it ring. "Ma'am, this is Trooper Harkins, Pennsylvania State Police. Am I speaking with Sandra Calloway, registered owner of a 2018 Honda CR-V? That's me." He told me in the clean, precise language of someone who has done this many times. The driver had been my sister, Renee Marie Calloway. License suspended since January. Both minor children in the back had been unrestrained, ages 6 and 4. A broken vape cartridge with trace THC residue had been found in the glove compartment. The children had been distressed enough at the stop that a follow-up welfare check had been requested from the county. "Ma'am, your vehicle is being held at Lehigh Valley Towing in Allentown. Total comes to $1,800. The registered owner must retrieve it in person within 5 days. Bring your title, registration, and a photo ID." "I understand. Ma'am, one more thing. Your sister called from the station last evening and asked that we contact you on her behalf. She referenced your name 3 times. I want to be clear for the record. She had no documentation indicating she had permission to operate the vehicle. I understand that as well." He paused. I think he expected me to break. Most people probably did. "Ma'am, one final question. When was the last time you were aware of your sister having a valid driver's license?" I knew the answer. I had not been permitted, until that exact moment, to know that I already knew it. "I think she had one when she was 24, I said. "She's 33 now." "Yes, ma'am. That's consistent with what we have." I thanked him. I hung up. Carter called from the living room asking if dinner was close. I told him almost. I stood in the kitchen and counted to 47 on the microwave clock. Then I drained the pasta and called him to the table. Saturday morning I dropped Carter at his father's house. I told him I had some grown-up loose ends to take care of. He hugged me with both arms and said, "Have a good grown-up day, Mom," and walked inside without a backward glance. It was 47 minutes from there to Lehigh Valley Towing. I had the address saved in my phone. The title sat in a manila folder on the passenger seat. I had a thermos of black coffee. The impound lot was a long fence strip behind a body shop. A small trailer served as the office up front. The clerk inside was named Carl, according to his work shirt, and he had been processing situations like mine long enough to read a face the way I read a general ledger. 2018 Honda CR-V, he said. Came in Thursday. That's mine. He handed me a clipboard. The invoice was broken into line items. Tow $375. Storage 5 days at $48. $240. Impound fee $350. Child welfare investigation hold $500. Administrative retrieval $335. Total $1,800. I pulled the legal pad from my bag and copied every line in pencil. Carl watched me copy it. Then very quietly he said, "Most people just sign and cry." "I'm not most people, Carl." "No, ma'am. I can see that. Take a full copy of the breakdown. You'll want it down the road." I paid with the emergency card. I followed Carl to the lot. There was a new dent in the rear bumper. There was dried vomit on the back seat upholstery. A small white sneaker Dylan's was wedged under the front passenger seat. There was a smell I couldn't name out loud, and at the same time could name perfectly. It was the smell of someone else's family having made themselves at home inside something I owned. I drove back with all 4 windows down and the heat running full blast. The warm air fought the cold the way a body warms up cold sheets. I stopped at a gas station outside Bethlehem and bought every cleaning product they stocked: wipes, upholstery foam, an orange-scented odor eliminator, and I sat in that parking lot for 10 minutes before I could drive again. Then I went home and pulled into my own driveway. The driveway felt like a piece of evidence too. I called my mother at 1 o'clock. I had cleaned the back seat first. I made the call from my kitchen because I always make hard calls from kitchens. There's a specific cardinal that visits the feeder outside my window every afternoon, and I needed it there as a witness. Mom, when exactly did Renee lose her license? Sandra, don't drag your sister through this over the phone. I'm not dragging anyone. I'm asking you a direct question. A pause. Then a softer one. January. And you let her drive my car. Honey, your father, we honestly didn't think she would. A click. My father picked up the extension. Don't blow this out of proportion, Sandra. The girl had a rough stretch. Nobody got hurt. The phrase nobody got hurt. The language of people who have decided ahead of time to define hurt as narrowly as possible. Was it a hit and run? I asked. The pause this time stretched longer than the one before it. My father exhaled through his nose the way he does when he needs a few more seconds. My mother said, Sandra, it was complicated. Was it a hit and run, Mom? Sweetheart, I really don't think rehashing this helps. Yes or no? It was. Complicated. Complicated meant yes. I knew that. I sat at the kitchen table. The cardinal came to the feeder, pecked 3 times, disappeared again. I watched it go. Mom, I said, I want you to understand something. I'm not raising my voice right now. I'm asking for the record. Who in this family knew that Renee's license was suspended? Who made the decision to keep that from me when you took my car? You're acting like an attorney, Sandra. I'm acting like a person who spent $1,800 yesterday. Sweetheart, you can absorb that more easily than your sister can. That line. I had heard a version of it my entire life. I had heard it as a child when the new clothes went to Renee and the hand-me-downs came to me. I had heard it after my divorce when, because I'd managed to keep the house, I became the one expected to keep covering everything else. I told my mother I had to go. I hung up before either of them could say my name again. I texted Patrice. Free Monday morning before clients? She replied within the minute. Yes. Coffee. My turn to buy. Patrice and I met at a coffee shop near the office at 7:45 on Monday. The place had a tile floor that someone scrubbed every Sunday night. The espresso machine had a small green pilot light. Patrice was already in a corner booth with 2 coffees and a cinnamon roll halved on a single plate. She didn't say hello. She said, eat half of that. Talk while you chew. I ate half. I told her the whole thing in plain language. The empty driveway, the trooper, the dent in the bumper, the $1,800, the phone call to my parents, the word complicated. Patrice listened the way she listened, the way certain women earn their silver hair. She drank her coffee. She did not interrupt. When I finished, she said, I'm going to ask you something hard. Okay. Right now, are you a witness or a target? What's the difference? A witness has a story to tell. A target has exposure. You're currently both. We need to figure out which one matters more before Friday. I rolled my pen between 2 fingers. I'd done that since middle school. My father had told me once it made me look nervous in presentations. I had quit doing it for him. I had started again the year my marriage ended. What kind of exposure are we talking? Insurance. Possible negligence claims if someone had been injured and a lawyer circles back. Your name on the title is your name on the title. She paused. And then there's the thing that isn't on paper yet. Which is? The part where your family assumes the next $1,800 is yours to give. She slid a business card across the table. Laura Delaney, Esquire. Family Law. Delaney and Associates. My cousin, Patrice said. She handles this type of situation. Mostly financial elder abuse cases. My parents aren't elderly, Patrice. I didn't say it was about your parents. I looked at her. She held my gaze. I picked up the card and tucked it behind Carter's school photo in my wallet, where I keep things I may need to reach quickly. Sandra, sweetheart, I've been doing paralegal work for 22 years. I know exactly what a family looks like in the moments before anyone calls a lawyer. Yours is already past that point. I finished my coffee. The card stayed in my wallet for 9 days. That Monday night, after Carter was asleep, I plugged the dash cam into my laptop. I had been putting it off for 4 days. The cam was small, but its memory was deep. I made tea I didn't drink, and I moved through the footage chronologically the way you'd review a set of bank statements. Friday, the night my parents took the car, was unremarkable. The driveway in darkness. Renee's face briefly crossing the camera as she leaned over to start the engine. Then the windshield moving through neighborhoods. Then quiet for several hours. Saturday afternoon was where everything changed. The cabin audio kicked in at 1:43 p.m. The kids were in the back. Dylan was asking in his persistent small child voice whether they could put on Encanto again. Paige was humming something. Renee had her phone on speaker, propped against the dashboard, and she was talking to someone whose name I couldn't quite catch in the audio. What I caught without any difficulty. They don't think we used Mom's plan. If anything happens with the cops, tell them I'm staying at Sandra's that night. That's the address on file. Then after a beat. Yeah, Dad already called a lawyer in case. I stopped the playback. I went back 10 seconds. Played it again. Then a third time. In the background of the third playback, Dylan's small voice. Mommy, can we listen to Encanto again? I sat at the kitchen table with both hands flat on the wood for a long time. The refrigerator hummed. The light over the sink made a soft yellow ring I had somehow never noticed before. My entire life I had been told I was the one who dramatized things. My entire life I had been told I read too much into situations. It wasn't until that Monday night that I finally understood the actual function of the word dramatic. It had been applied to me. It had been deployed in a kitchen, by a woman who had been sitting in a car with two unbelted children and a phone pressed to her ear, coordinating with someone, my father almost certainly, which version of events to present if the situation required a version. I opened a new worksheet in my workbook. I named it Audit. I typed in the timestamp. The audit had officially begun. Tuesday morning I did what an accountant does with a messy file. I researched. Pennsylvania maintains a public records portal for court filings. It loads slowly and the search interface is rough. I made coffee, set the laptop on the kitchen table, and worked through it the way I work through any disorganized ledger, methodically, one line at a time, keeping my own running notes in a separate document. Renee Marie Calloway, defendant, Bucks County, January of this year. Plea entered. The case summary described a parked vehicle struck on a residential street in the late evening. The driver had fled the scene. She had later been identified through camera footage from a neighbor's porch camera. She had pled to a reduced charge. The license suspension took effect the following week. I logged it. Then I searched her name in the adjacent county, the one where I knew her custody matter would have been filed. I had not known there was a custody matter. There was. Filed in February of this year. Renee naming Dylan's father as the respondent and petitioning for primary physical custody. The petition cited stable county residency with nearby extended family support. The residential address she had listed was not her apartment in Reading. It was my townhouse in Bethlehem. I read that line 3 times. She had filed court documents in February claiming she resided with me. She had been driving my car the previous Saturday along state route corridors in Bucks County to attend a Friday afternoon appointment at her custody attorney's office in Allentown, children in tow. She had been constructing a paper trail placing her in my county in a car registered to my address. Had the custody petition moved forward without anyone catching it, my home would have been a documented residence in a custody proceeding I had never been told existed. I would have become a non-party deponent. I would have been subpoenaed. My son would have been pulled into its orbit. Carter's father would have been called by his own attorney. Renee had not been borrowing my car for a weekend trip. Renee had been borrowing my identity for a year. I printed the relevant docket pages at the public records office downtown. The clerk behind the counter said, 80 cents. I gave him $1 and told him to keep the change. He looked at me in a way that told me it was the first time in several days I had actually smiled. Tuesday afternoon I picked Carter up from school. He climbed into the passenger seat. He'd been allowed up front for a year now, and buckled himself in with the care of a child who had been taught to do things correctly. His backpack sat in his lap. He smelled like crayons and the specific pink rubber of the erasers they hand out in 2nd grade. We took the back road past the apple orchard on the way home. The maples were burning red at the edges. He looked out the window for a while and then said, "Mom, is everything okay?" I didn't lie to him. He was 7, but a particular kind of 7. Their mom is working through some grown-up stuff, I said. And Dylan and Paige are with their dad for right now. They're safe. Are you also doing the grown-up working through? I laughed, the first time in 4 days. Yeah, bud. I think I'm doing it for the first time. He nodded the way kids do. I want to pause for just a second here. If you have ever spent your life being the one your family calls when something goes wrong, but never the one they call when something goes right, type reliable in the comments. I want to know how many of us are out here tonight. And if you're new to this channel, the subscribe button is the quiet one that doesn't cost you anything. Now back to that Tuesday. When we got home, Carter set his backpack on the kitchen table and started on his math homework. I made him a glass of milk and sat across from him watching him work for a while. The kitchen light at 4:15 in October has a quality I find impossible to accurately describe. It is gold the way warm honey is gold, and it spreads itself across the maple tabletop the way a cat arranges itself in a sunbeam. My whole life I had been taught that keeping the peace was a form of love. That being the steady one meant accepting the weight other people didn't want to carry. I sat watching Carter press his pencil carefully into the tens column, and I thought about how many years I had spent holding weight that had never been mine, and how little of my own life had been built without it dragging at the foundation. Carter fell asleep against my shoulder during a movie that night. I didn't move for 10 full minutes after the credits ended. Wednesday at 11:02 a.m. My desk phone lit up. Renee. Sobbing. CPS had visited her Monday. The trooper's welfare check had set it off. She needed $5,000 immediately, for her custody attorney and for an emergency parenting course the court was now mandating. Sandra, I am begging you. I can't lose them. Please. I let her cry through the receiver for a while. I watched the green light on the phone blink with each sound. Then I said, I'll think about it. I have to get back to work. I logged the call. Time topic emotional register. At 11:23 my desk phone buzzed again. My mother, using the gentle voice she reserved for funerals and for requests she wouldn't have made of Renee. Sweetheart, those children. You're the only one in this family with real savings. I'll think about it, Mom. I have to go. Logged. At 11:41 my father. We'd cover this ourselves, Sandra, but between the basement repair last fall and everything else, you've always had the stronger financial head in this family. That's why we come to you. He said it like praise. He said it like he hadn't spent 6 years quietly pulling from my grandmother's trust to cover costs he never named. I didn't know about the trust yet. I would find out on Friday afternoon. But sitting at my desk that Wednesday, listening to the same script delivered in 3 separate voices across a 39-minute window, each voice certain it was being spontaneous, I knew enough. I'll think about it, Dad. I have to go. I hung up. I stared at the green light on my phone and turned my pen between my fingers. I pulled up the email draft I had written to Laura Delaney 2 mornings before, and had not yet sent. I sent it. The card had been in my wallet for 9 days. It went into active use at noon. Laura's office was in a converted brick row house on a side street in downtown Bethlehem. A small brass plate by the door said simply Delaney and Associates. The reception area had 1 chair, an umbrella stand, and a framed print of a river bridge on the wall. Laura came out herself. Flats, reading glasses on a beaded chain, and shook my hand. She was 31 and made no effort to appear otherwise. She listened to the entire account without touching her legal pad. Then she opened the legal pad and began writing. Sandra, I want to walk you through what's ahead. Tell me if you want me to stop at any point. I nodded. She went through it 1 finger at a time the way you count things that need counting. 1. The $1,800 is paid. That chapter is closed. You won't recover it from your sister. 2. Your insurance policy. Once the unauthorized operator report goes in, your premium increases significantly, possibly 25 to 30%. There's a fair chance you receive a non-renewal letter. 3. Your homeowner's umbrella is bundled with your auto policy. If the auto policy lapses, the umbrella disappears with it. You have a 30-day window, not more. 4. Your CPA license. Pennsylvania doesn't require disclosure of family criminal proximity, but your employer's fidelity bond likely does. We need to look at your contract language. 5. Your mortgage covenant. Any lapse in insurance coverage technically puts you in technical breach. Banks don't usually notice unless someone tells them. 6. Your sister's custody petition. As long as your address appears in her court filing, you are a non-party deponent. Document subpoenas, depositions, the full process, including questions that eventually involve your son. I sat rolling my pen between my fingers. Laura, I said, what does winning look like from here? She looked at me steadily. That's not the question I can answer for you. I want you to write it down tonight. Bring it to me Thursday. 3 things you need to be true. The third one is the one we fight for. I drove home and wrote my list on the back of a receipt. The list had 4 items. I crossed the 4th one out twice and then wrote it back in. Thursday morning, Laura and I sat across from each other at her conference table. She had 3 folders in front of her. Folder 1. Insurance company notification of unauthorized operator. We identify Renee as the driver. We attach the police report. This protects you on premium liability and future exposure. Folder 2. Written statement to the investigating trooper. We clarify in formal language that you were not present, did not consent to the trip, and had no knowledge of its purpose. This protects you on negligence grounds. Folder 3. Certified letter to Renee's custody attorney. We withdraw your Bethlehem address as a residency reference. A copy goes to her court of record. You'll sign each document in 3 places and initial the bottom of every page. After this morning, Sandra, the dynamic with your family changes. I want you to be ready. I signed. There is a particular stillness that settles over you when you sign documents you cannot take back. It is not quite relief. It is the quiet of having finally crossed a boundary you had been telling yourself was somewhere further off. The last signature on the 3rd folder took the longest, the custody letter, the one that withdrew my address. I thought about Dylan. About Paige. About the small white sneaker I had found wedged under my passenger seat. I thought about Renee at 6 years old, sitting on the porch of our childhood house with her elbows on her knees and her front teeth missing. I had loved that little girl. She had been my person for most of a decade. I signed. Laura stacked the folders and tied them the way older offices used to tie folders. Expect a call from your mother within 4 hours, she said. Possibly 2. What do I do? Don't answer the first call. Listen to the voicemail once. Don't listen twice. Then go pick up your son like it's an ordinary Thursday afternoon. I walked back to my car. My phone was face down on the passenger seat where I'd left it. I drove 1 block before it lit up with my mother's name. I let it go to voicemail. The voicemail was 47 seconds long. Played it once. I did not play it twice. I was at Carter's school by 3. My mother arrived at my townhouse at 7:48 that Thursday evening. Carter had eaten dinner. He was upstairs reading. I had been settling onto the couch with a glass of wine and an old British baking competition, the routine I had constructed slowly across the 4 years since my divorce. The doorbell rang. I knew before I turned the handle. She was crying. She had received the certified letter. So had Renee's attorney. So had the insurance carrier. The sequence had begun at 3:30 that afternoon. How could you do this to your own sister? She said. She has children, Sandra. We raised you to know better than this. She came inside without being invited. She stood in my front hall in her wool coat, and what she was performing had the texture of something that had been worn many times before. My phone rang. My father. I let it go. He would leave a voicemail. I would learn later, he had said. If you don't pull the report, I'm removing your name from the will. My mother's older sister, Aunt Patricia, was already composing the family group text. I'd read it later. Sandra has decided to take legal action against Renee and traumatize those children. 14 names on the thread. Carter appeared at the top of the stairs in rocket ship pajamas. Mom, why is Grandma crying? And I will tell you exactly what almost happened in the 5 seconds that followed. I nearly stepped back over the line. I nearly called Laura and asked her to pull everything. I nearly picked up the phone and told my father, fine, we'll talk it through on Sunday. Then my mother, still crying, looking up at me over my own banister, said, You always were the cold one in this family, Sandra. I had spent my whole life being called dramatic. It wasn't until that moment that I understood the word cold. It was the same instrument with a different handle. It meant, the daughter who will not absorb our consequences. I held the door open. Mom, I said very quietly, I'm not cold. I'm clear. There's a distinction. I'm going to ask you to leave now. She left. Carter came down the stairs. We made hot chocolate at almost 10 o'clock on a school night. We played Uno. He won 3 rounds. I was glad. Friday morning I drove to Laura's office. She was waiting. She had 3 documents ready on the conference table. Sit down, she said. We're assembling the packet you'll bring Sunday. The first document. A certified transcript of the dashcam audio. Renee's recorded phone call, timestamped, produced by a professional transcription service. 2 pages. The second document. The police report excerpt, the itemized tow invoice, and a 1-page summary on Laura's firm letterhead laying out the specific legal risks created by that Saturday's trip. The third document. A bank statement. Laura had pulled it the previous afternoon, after I had given her the account number for the trust my paternal grandmother had established before her death. The trust had been set up to fund my college education. After my divorce, when I had been working double hours to hold on to the house, my father had told me the trust had been exhausted and that I should consider it well spent. I hadn't checked the statements in 8 years. I had assumed the way daughters are taught to assume. The statement documented 6 years of withdrawals into an account in Renee's name. Steady intervals. 4-figure amounts. Court costs. Legal fees. A few entries labeled only Renee. The total drawn over 6 years. $47,300. Remaining balance. $11,243. Laura let me sit with the statement. You don't need to read all 3 at the dinner table, she said. Lead with the document the room can't argue with. Which one is that? The one your mother helped create. I knew which one it was. We made copies. Laura gave me a sealed manila envelope. She gave me a second sealed copy, identically prepared, addressed in her own handwriting to a name I recognized. Aunt Edith. Your aunt has been calling my office for 2 weeks, Laura said. I haven't returned her calls because she's your family member, not my client. But she'll be at that dinner on Sunday. Hand her the second envelope. I left the office with both envelopes under one arm. They weighed less than a paperback novel. They would weigh considerably more later. Friday afternoon at 3:48, the receptionist at my office buzzed my desk. Sandra, your father is in the lobby. I hadn't seen him in 8 days. I asked her to put him in the small conference room. I closed the Henderson file I had been working on. I walked down the hallway without hurrying. He was seated facing the door, the way men of his generation sit when they are either about to lie or about to stop lying. His hands were folded on the table. He had aged since I had looked at him clearly last. Sandra, your mother doesn't know I came. Okay, Dad. I needed to tell you something before Sunday. He breathed out through his nose, buying time. Renee's first DUI was 8 years ago. We kept it quiet. The hit and run in 2019, I settled it privately with the other party. The plea this past January. There have been ongoing costs throughout. We've been using the trust to cover them. He looked at his hands. We told ourselves we would put it back. We genuinely believed we would. I didn't move. How much, Dad? $47,000. A little over. Still I didn't move. There was a small ficus tree in the corner of the conference room. I had never once noticed it before that afternoon. Did you and Mom send Renee to use my address in her custody filing? He said nothing. He looked at the ficus. He pressed his thumb into his opposite palm. He cried the way men of his generation cry, silently with their eyes pressed shut. The silence was the answer. Dad, I said, you and Mom thought you were rescuing Renee. You were letting her drown. And you were using me as the life raft to do it. I am not your secondary account. I have never been your secondary account. Sandra, please. Please what, Dad? Please don't move forward with the civil claim. I sat with that for 30 seconds. I sat with it the way I sit with any entry on a balance sheet that cannot, not for love, not for arithmetic, be made to reconcile. I'll see you Sunday, Dad. He stood. He nodded. He walked out past the receptionist without making eye contact. I heard the elevator close. I went back to my office. I closed the door. I worked through dinner. That Friday night after Carter was asleep, I sent my mother a single text. I'm coming Sunday. 3 minutes later, she replied. We didn't think you would. I didn't write back. There was nothing to add. Saturday morning, I drove Carter to his father's for the afternoon and told him I'd be home for bedtime. He looked at me with that careful, considered expression he'd been holding all week, a question he kept choosing not to ask out loud. Mom, you're sure you're okay? I'm sure, Bud. He hugged me with both arms and walked inside. I am going to carry the shape of that hug for the rest of my life. Saturday afternoon, I cleaned the car completely. Every surface. Inside the trunk, beneath the floor mats, inside the cup holders, inside the door pockets. I removed the extra car seat from the back and wiped it down with disinfectant. I scrubbed the fabric where the vomit had dried. Then I went to the garage and opened the kit I'd picked up at the auto parts store: body filler, sandpaper grits, touch-up paint in my car's exact color code. I worked the dent in the rear bumper for 2.5 hours. The radio was tuned to an old country station I sometimes put on when I had the house to myself. Patsy Cline came on. The DJ played Crazy twice in a row. Either he was behind or he was sentimental, and I couldn't determine which, and I did not care. I sang along badly, my mouth full of fine dust. By 4 o'clock, the bumper was as close to right as I could make it. Not factory perfect, but mine again. Repaired by the hands of the woman who owned it. Sunday morning, I attended services at a Methodist church in Easton I'd never visited before. I sat in the last row. The minister was a woman in her early 50s. She preached on the parable of the prodigal son. She said something I had not once heard in any version of that sermon before, that the elder sibling had a story running through that parable too, and that the father's love for the elder child was a different shape, not a diminished one. I cried briefly in my pew. No one saw it. I didn't know a single person in that building. I drove home. Sunday afternoon at 4:43, I started the car. The envelope was on the passenger seat. The car was finally itself again. Let me go back one evening before I take you into my mother's dining room. Saturday night, after the body filler had cured and I'd picked Carter up, I sat with him at bedtime. He had his copy of Frog and Toad Are Friends out. I've loved that book since I was a child. It is, as far as I can tell, the most honest book about love that has ever been written for young people. He asked me to read the chapter about the cookies, the one where Toad can't stop eating them and Frog keeps trying to help him find the will to stop, and finally Frog takes the whole batch outside and throws them to the birds. When I closed the book, Carter looked at me very carefully. Mom, do you love Aunt Renee? He had been sitting on that question for at least 3 days. I didn't answer right away. I gave the question the same weight he had been giving it. I love who I thought she could become, I said. And I love the little girl I knew when she was your age. I think some people we have to love from a distance. Not because they're terrible, because staying close was making both of us someone we didn't want to be. He thought about that in the way he thinks about hard things. The lamp made a soft circle on the ceiling. Like Toad and the cookies, he said. I laughed, the first laugh that actually surprised me in 2 weeks, the kind that catches you off guard in your own chest. Yes, Bud. Exactly like Toad and the cookies. He settled against my arm. I stayed beside him until his breathing slowed into the deep, even rhythm of real sleep. Then I stayed 14 more minutes after that just to be sure. The baby lotion in his hair smelled the same as the night I brought him home. The clock in the hallway kept ticking. My entire childhood, I had been taught that loving someone meant taking on the weight of what they refused to carry themselves. I sat on the edge of my son's small bed in the circle of the lamp and thought, quietly, no, that's not what love is. That has never been what love is. I tucked him in. I went downstairs. I read through the envelope one final time. I slept 4 hours. It was enough. Sunday at 5. My mother's house in Quakertown. 27 people in the living and dining rooms. I counted the way I always counted. Aunts, uncles, cousins. Several of the cousins had brought children along. Dylan and Paige were at the kids' table in the corner with paper plates and orange juice in plastic cups. Renee was perched on the arm of the couch in a glitter sash that read Birthday Girl. She did not look at me when I came through the door. Aunt Edith was in the kitchen with my mother, seeing to the pot roast. She did look at me. She gave one brief, small nod. I handed her the second envelope without a word. She placed it inside her own bag without a word. We walked into the dining room together. There were 6 chairs at the table. The folding chair from the back porch was positioned at the foot, the same brown metal chair as every Sunday before this. I took the folding chair. I set my purse on the floor beside my feet. The first envelope was inside. We ate the pot roast. We ate the green bean casserole with the crispy onion topping. Cousin Marcus, who is 28 and recently moved back to the area, sat across from me. He kept catching my eye across the table. He never said anything. But his silence carried the particular weight of a person who has been waiting for something for a long time. Near the end of dessert, yellow cake from a box, chocolate frosting from a tub, my mother stood up. She tapped her glass with the back of a butter knife. "Sandra," she said, and gave me the same smile she always used when she hoped I would follow the script. "Would you like to say a few words for your sister's birthday?" I folded my napkin beside my plate. I stood up. I took the envelope from my purse. "Honey," my mother said in a slightly altered register, "just keep it light. We all know speeches aren't your thing." "I keep mine brief, Mom," I said. "This one runs about 90 seconds. I timed it." I held the envelope. 27 pairs of eyes recalibrated in my direction. The dining room fell into the specific kind of quiet that arrives when 27 forks hover at the exact same moment. I opened the envelope. The first document was the dashcam transcript. I read 3 sentences from it. "This is a transcript of audio captured inside my own vehicle last Saturday afternoon. It was recorded by a dashcam I had installed for safety purposes. The driver, my sister, is on the phone with someone during the recording." I read 3 sentences slowly, in the same measured voice I use when I read legal language to clients. A murmur moved around the table. Aunt Patricia's hand went to her mouth. Renee pushed to her feet. "Sandra, that is completely out of context." "Renee, I have 90 seconds. You'll have more than enough time after." I moved to the second document. I read the heading, the date, and the language about 2 minor children, neither restrained. The suspended license. The $1,800. A sound ran through the room, not yet shaped into words but a sound. The particular sound of 27 people having the same realization simultaneously. I moved to the third document. This last item is a 6-year account statement. It comes from the trust my grandmother established before she died. The trust was designated for my college education. After my divorce, my father told me it had been exhausted, spent on the right thing, he said. I understood him to mean my education. I held the page up. It was not spent on my education. It was withdrawn over 6 years in increments directed to an account in my sister's name. Court fees, legal retainers, and other costs. The total drawn over that period, $47,300. The remaining balance, $11,243. My father closed his eyes. My mother's hand moved to his arm without looking. Renee stood up, sat back down, stood again. Aunt Edith, standing in the kitchen doorway with a dish towel over one shoulder, said very quietly, I told you, Diane. I told you this years ago. From the children's table came Dylan's clear, unbothered voice. Mommy, what's a suspended license? Not one person at the dining room table laughed. I finished. I placed the documents back inside the envelope. I sealed it. I found Aunt Edith's eyes across the room and held them for 2 full seconds. Then I turned back to the table. Mom, Dad, Renee, I didn't come here tonight to debate whether any of this occurred. I have the documentation. My attorney holds copies. Aunt Edith now holds copies as well. I am here so that everyone in this room can stop performing a version of this family that does not exist. You can stop pretending not to know. My mother said my name. I waited. She didn't follow it with anything. I am filing a civil claim Monday morning for restoration of the trust. The amount is $47,300. If the family chooses to settle before court, my attorney's contact information is inside the envelope. I won't be revisiting this at family occasions. There won't be many family occasions. Picked up my purse. Mom, thank you for dinner. The pot roast was excellent. Renee stood all the way up. Sandra, you are dismantling us. I looked at her. I had been her older sister for 33 years. I had loved her from the day she came home from the hospital wrapped in a yellow blanket. For 1 second I held the full weight of that love. And in the next second I understood that it did not alter what was factually true. Renee, I said, keeping my voice level, I'm choosing not to be dismantled with you. Those are different things. My father reached toward my arm as I passed his chair. I stepped back and his hand found only air. Dad, please don't touch me right now. I walked through the kitchen. Aunt Edith followed. Neither of us spoke until we were standing on the gravel of the driveway beside my rental car. The October air smelled like burning leaves from somewhere 2 streets over. The porch light buzzed faintly overhead. Sweetheart, she said. I am so sorry it took 38 years for someone to do this. I put my arms around her. We stood there for a while. She is a small woman. She smelled like rose hand cream and the particular warmth of a kitchen that has been cooking all day. Call me Tuesday, Aunt Edith. You'd better believe I'll be calling you first, sweetheart. I drove home with the windows up. The folding chair was still sitting empty in my mother's dining room. I had not carried it back inside. I had never been the one to carry it back inside. I was not going back inside. Tuesday morning, Aunt Edith called at 9:14. Sweetheart, I have been keeping my own ledger for years. The cousins, the ones who have been calling me, the ones I told to give your aunt some grace, she's carrying a lot. 3 of them have reached out since Sunday. She listed them. Cousin Marcus. Cousin Vanessa, who lived in Allentown and taught at an elementary school. Cousin Laurel, who had relocated to Vermont and rarely made it down anymore. All 3 had been, at some point or another, labeled the difficult one in the family. Not one of them, until this past Sunday, had known there were others. I want you to come to dinner next Sunday at my house, Sandra. You and Liam Carter. The 4 of you plus me. I'll make the pot roast. I've always made it better than your mother. She knows this and has never once admitted it. I laughed. Aunt Edith. We'll be there. Bring your boy. I have a yard he'll want to run in. That afternoon, Cousin Marcus sent me a single text. Finally, I let my mother's calls go to voicemail. There were 2 more after Sunday. Each ran about 20 seconds. I didn't delete them. I didn't listen to them either. Laura called Wednesday at 3. Renee's custody attorney had withdrawn from the case. The court had placed a hold on her petition pending review of the criminal referrals. Laura had received an email from a different attorney, this one representing my parents, inquiring about the trust fund claim. The email used the word amicable. Tori, Sandra. They want to settle. For how much? They've offered $42,800. They say they can't reach the full amount without taking a second mortgage on the house. They've already initiated the paperwork. I had a colleague verify. It's accurate. I sat with that. Take it, Laura. Don't push them further than what they actually have. Are you certain? I'm certain. She paused. Sandra, you don't have to extend them grace here. I'm not extending grace. I'm closing the ledger. Those are 2 completely different things. She laughed. Yeah, okay. I'll draw up the paperwork. We can finalize Friday. I hung up. I went and cut Carter a bowl of cherry tomatoes halved the way he liked them. He had asked that morning if there were any left. 6 weeks later, I sat at the kitchen table with Carter doing subtraction homework across from me. The trust funds had been deposited 3 weeks prior. I had transferred the full amount that same afternoon into Carter's college savings, which was, I suspected, exactly where my grandmother had always hoped that money would end up. The settlement was signed. A no-contact arrangement between Renee and me was formalized. My address had been officially withdrawn from her custody petition. Her case had been refiled in her own county, under her own address, the way it should have been from the beginning. The dash cam was sitting in a small drawer in the garage. I had wiped the lens clean. I had not reinstalled it in the car. I might not. Either way, the car was mine. Carter looked up from his subtraction. Mom. Yeah, bud. Does Grandma still love me? I sat with that question. He had been carrying it for 6 weeks. Yes, I said. She does. From a distance. Sometimes that's the form love has to take in order to be safe. He thought about that carefully. Like Toad and the cookies, he said. I laughed. The kitchen turned golden in that exact minute. The light at 6 o'clock in late October is a specific kind of warm, amber and slow and low, And it laid itself across the maple table the way it had laid itself across every table of my childhood, and I let myself feel it. Yeah, bud. Like Toad and the cookies. He went back to his homework. I made him a grilled cheese. The kitchen smelled like butter and the crust crisping at the edges. The radio was on low, an oldies station. Something piano-heavy that I half recognized. Aunt Edith had called me again on Tuesday. We had a standing dinner at her house every other Sunday now. Cousin Marcus had come to the first one. Cousin Vanessa to the second. We had played Scrabble and had hot apple cider that smelled like cloves and holidays. Carter had run laps around the backyard with the neighbor's beagle until his face was red and shining. I cut the sandwich on the diagonal and set it in front of him. He looked up. He smiled the smile he had been smiling since he was a baby. The one that only lifts one corner of his mouth, like he's letting you in on a quiet joke. Thanks, Mom. You're welcome, bud. I sat across from him and watched him eat. Nobody had told me growing up that grace could arrive in the form of a grilled cheese sandwich at 6 in the evening in October with the radio on low. I know it now. Some knowledge you only get to keep after you've paid for it. The following Tuesday I went back to my office. The cubicle was the same cubicle. The fluorescent tube above my desk still flickered on the left side the same as it always had. Patrice stopped at my desk on her way through and set a ceramic mug, not paper, in front of me without breaking stride. You're welcome, she said over her shoulder. Thank you, Patrice. How's Carter? He's good. He's wise. He's 7. She laughed from halfway down the hall. 7 is a good age. Keep him there as long as you can. I drank the coffee. It was exactly the right temperature. There is a small frame on my desk now. 3 photographs. Carter at 5. Carter at 7. And an image I had asked Aunt Edith to find. A photo from the Lehigh County Fair when I was 6, the two of us with cotton candy on our faces, squinting against the sun. I hadn't known that photograph existed. She had gone into a box in her basement and brought it to dinner wrapped in a paper towel. Behind Carter's school photo in my wallet is Laura Delaney's business card. I haven't needed to call her again. I keep the card because some women need someone to point them toward a door, and I want to be ready if one of them ever asks me where it is. That morning on the drive to school, I took the highway past the Quakertown exit without slowing down. The sun was at the exact angle that turns the windshield gold for about 4 minutes in October. Carter was humming something in the back seat, a song he'd learned at school that week. I didn't recognize the melody. It didn't matter. At the very start of this story, I told you that the morning my mother said, "Don't make this dramatic," was the morning I learned how a quiet woman finds her voice. That part is true. But there was a second half I hadn't reached yet. The second half is this. After a quiet woman has been loud, she becomes quiet again. The room around her is different. The chair she sits in is her own. The driveway is her own. The car is her own. The morning light is her own. I used to believe that family was the place you could always return to. What I understand now is that it can also be the place you finally walk away from, and still feel entirely, completely whole. If this story stayed with you tonight, if you recognized a sister, a daughter, an aunt, or your own reflection somewhere in it, leave one word in the comments. The word your family has used to keep you small. I read every single one. There are more stories on this channel. The next one involves a will, a stepmother, and a letter that took 47 years to find the right pair of hands. I'll see you there.